This is the Precision Report Writer 3 webinar. We're going to look at some more advanced features in the Report Writer today, including things like how you can edit the format of the reports that you create, how you can add student pictures to the requests that you create, and also we'll look at expressions and variables, tools that provide you with some additional calculation features in the Report Writer. So I'm going to start simply by going into Precision Report Writer under School Management Reports. Going to go to the folder where I've worked in creating some of the different requests we've used in this series of webinars, and I'm actually going to go into, I think, the very first one I created in PRW 1, which was the homeroom listing. So I'm simply going to highlight that report and click on the option to edit it. And I believe last time I came in and edited the layout of this report. I'm going to go into the data items area, and you'll notice that once you go into a report and start changing any part of the layout, anytime you go into data items or the filter or the sort and group area, you'll get this message that you have a custom layout. I'm going to continue, and here I'm simply going to remove a field and put it back so the system thinks I made a change. And when I click OK, it's going to give me the option to keep the custom layout I had or to go back to the automated format. And for now, I'm going to go to the automated format. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to make some changes here in the setup and then venture into the formatting itself. One of the features I appreciate the most in the Report Writer is the fact that you can copy requests and work in a copy of a request, thereby kind of giving yourself the option to go back to a previous version of any of these requests. So I'm simply going to preview my homeroom listing. It's grade level that I'm filtering on. Let me preview this report. We'll look at 10th graders. And this is pretty basic. I just have each homeroom starting on a new page. And I just wanted to point out the Save As feature here. The Save As feature in any of these requests basically copies the request for you. You can make as many copies of a request as you need to at any stage of the process as you need to. And I'll talk about this as we continue through this afternoon's webinar, but it's a great tool. It kind of gives you the flexibility to try different things, knowing that you can always go back to a version of the report that worked for you. So I'm simply going to click on Save As, and just like when you do a Save As in Word or Excel, I'm going to give this a slightly different name and description than the original. So this will be my homeroom listing 2. And when I click OK and close out of there, I'll see that I still have the original and then the copy that I can try some things out in. So I'll go to Edit This. In the Sort and Group area, previously I had grouped on homeroom and gone into the options, and in the formatting area indicated that I wanted a new page for each homeroom. In the Sort and Group area, you can also do some calculations. So when I select the option for calculations, you'll notice that down here I have buttons that are available to me, and the buttons that are available to me will be dependent on the data I've included in the report. So because I've simply asked for the students in each homeroom, the only calculation that's available to me is a count of the students in each homeroom. Some of these other buttons that might be available to you if you've selected appropriate data items would be a sum or an average, a minimum and maximum, and so forth. For our purposes, I'm going to click on Count so that the system will do the work of doing a count of how many records are in each homeroom. So I'll click OK and OK again, and now when I preview my report, After each group, I see how many records are in each homeroom grouping. So simply by going to the sort and group area and adding the option for the count calculation, I get the system to do that work for me. Now, as we touched on a little bit in the last webinar, you can edit the layout, the format of the various reports that you create. If you're looking at the preview, when you click on the Close Preview button, you can go to the Edit Layout option here. Another option for you is when you're in the request editor, you can click on Output and choose Edit, and that brings you to the same location as the Edit Layout option after a preview. Now this screen that we're looking at here is behind the scenes formatting of the report that we've just generated, and I just want to take a minute to kind of break down what we're looking at here so that you understand how things are separated and so forth. First of all, we have two menus that are available to us when we're in the layout area. There's a Report Controls menu we're going to be looking at shortly, what that gives you access to. It basically lets you add things to the report. And there's a Layout menu, which when we come in here and highlight various things, will give us the ability to center and so forth. So you'll have access to those two menus, and as you can see, I'm simply dragging them to a different location so that I get a better view of what is available for me here. I'm just going to move these off to the side for a minute. Basically, here on this screen, we're seeing the page divided into different sections. You'll notice that there are gray bars that extend across the page. Each one of them is a different section of the page, and above the gray bar is the information that's being displayed in that section of the page. So on the very first page of your report, especially if you have a multi-page report, we have this title area. Now, it's just standard in the report writer that what you'll see in the title area will be the name you gave this report, the description you gave this report, and the report heading. So let me close out of here. I'm not going to save any changes. And when I preview this, we'll just take a closer look at what's just on the title page. So you see here I have my HR List 2. That's the name I gave the report. Here's the description I gave the report. And you'll notice when I go from page to page that that's only visible on the first page because it's in the title area. There's a section labeled Page Header. This information would show up at the top of every page. So this includes a field that's already in place for you that would give you the page number. And also you can see I have column headings here for the different data items that I selected. So homeroom, student name, birthday, and gender. So that appears on every page because it's the page header. The next section you would only see if you had decided to group information on your report, and that's the group header. And this information shows up above each group, and in this case it's the label, homeroom, and then the actual homeroom number. Then we have a detail area where we see the specifics for each student, homeroom, name, birthday, and gender. Because I've grouped on homeroom, I have a group footer area, and because I've asked for totals and a count of records, I see the records in group label and then the field that gives me that number. The page footer is visible at the bottom of each page. That would be the date and time of the report. And then the summary is visible on the last page of the report, and that gives you a total count of the records included in the report. So if I close out of here and look at my report again, page header here, because I have an Ask It Runtime filter, just the title page is going to give me the option I included in the Ask It Runtime filter, but the page number is at the top of each page, as well as the column headings, the label HR, and then the homeroom number is the group heading, and then we see the detail area with the specific students. We see the group footer with the totals for homeroom 201 being 10. At the bottom of each page, we see the date and time. And on the last page, in addition to that, we see the total number of records included on the report. So that's how this page is organized. When you see an item that's in a box, these rectangles here, that's a field whose information is going to change based on, the student you're looking at, or in this case, what report I'm running. The items you see that are not in boxes are the text that stays static on the report itself. So every page has the same set of column headings here. Now you have control over removing items here. So let's say that you didn't want the report name and description and the option you had selected for your Ask It Runtime filter to show up on this report. You can remove items simply by clicking on them to highlight them and hitting the delete key on your keyboard. So if I click on the report description box, hopefully you can see that it's highlighted. It's going to have, a highlight in each corner, and then midway through each line. When it's highlighted, I hit the delete key and it's gone. So I've just removed the 3 items that are shown on the title page. So you can click on an item and hit delete and remove it. You also can move around these sections on the report. So if I take, now that I'm not displaying anything on the title page, I can click with my mouse and drag the title bar up to the very top, and everything else will move up with it. And if I close out of here, the system, every time you close out of this format area, asks you if you want to save your changes, and I'll say yes, and then it shows me my resulting report. And you'll notice that now the top of each page simply starts with the page number and the column headings. Now, it's important to realize in the Edit Layout area, there is no Undo button. And after I preview the changes I've made in the format area, if I don't like it, there's no option for me to say go back to the version before I changed this layout. And that's why I make so many copies of my requests, especially if I'm in the layout area. If I'm going to try something and I'm not 100% sure it's going to have the intended effect, I'll make a copy of the report, go into the copy, try out whatever it is I want to do in the format area, because since there is no undo feature, if I don't like what happens as a result of my change, I can go back to the original I had and work with that. So you can move around the areas, the different sections of the report. We've seen that you can delete fields here. If you want to delete more than one field, so for instance, if I wanted to get rid of everything above the column headings in the page header, you see there are 3 different fields there. I could click on them individually and delete them one by one. I also have 2 different ways to select more than one item. I can click on one and then holding down my Shift key, click on the others that I want to select, and so now I have all 3 selected. So a Shift click selects other items. I also could just hold down the button on my mouse, and you'll see that my cursor changes into a pointing finger, and I can drag to select the group of items that I want to work with. So I've dragged and all three of these fields are highlighted, and then I can hit the delete key and remove them. So if I've removed the page number and everything from the top of the page, maybe I want to move my column headings up higher. I'm going to just hold down my mouse and drag to select not only the column headings but those underlines underneath them. And what I'm going to do is move these up further on the page. I'm going to do that once I have them highlighted just by hitting the up arrow on my keyboard. By the same token, I could use the right-hand arrow to move them over to the right. But when I'm moving a group of items that are in the same line or even the same column, I like to select them all together so that when I move them, they move as a unit and I don't have to worry about realigning them after they've been moved. And then I could move the page header up a little bit if I wanted, and so forth. I'm going to select everything down here in the group footer and move it down a little bit just by using my down arrow key. I just want to show you what happens if you move down the detail bar a bit. When I move the detail bar down, the result on my report is I'm going to have more space between each student name. Okay, so if you don't like the spacing of the detail that you have in the report, in this case, the detail is the student names and their birthday and gender, just moving down the detail band in the layout will increase the space between the student names. We looked last time really quickly at how you could adjust the font here in the formatting. So if I click on the student name, the font is controlled under the Format menu here, and Font, and I can select the font, the style, and the size. Let me move the menus off here. Now you can also add text to the report format. So the column headings that we see here are coming from the report writer. It looks at the field name, the data item that we've selected, and gives us an abbreviation that will fit in the column heading, but maybe you don't like those headings. So for homeroom, maybe I want both of those letters capitalized, or I want to abbreviate homeroom a different way. I can click on homeroom and you'll notice it becomes highlighted, and I can delete it to remove it. If I want to add text anywhere in the layout, I would come to the Report Controls menu and click on the A. Then I click where I want to start adding text in the report itself, and when I do so, I'll get a cursor. I type what I want to have appear there, and then I can click on what I just added and adjust the font as necessary. Maybe I want birth date to be DOB, so I'll click on birth date, hit delete to remove that, click on the A, click in this column heading, and label that DOB. If I then want all of the fonts for the column headings to be the same, I could drag and highlight the 4 different options there, go to Format and Font, and make sure they're all the same. And then when I close out and say yes, I can see the results of my handiwork. Another suggestion or something to consider is, again, relating to the fact that there's no undo button here when you're working with the formatting. I tend to make just a few changes at one time. If I came in here and I totally revamped the formatting and did all these different things with the formatting and then closed out and took a look at it, if there were things I didn't like, I've got more that I need to go back and adjust. So I like making just a couple changes at a time, looking at the result, making sure it's something that is what I intended, and then going back and making additional changes. Just looking at the report controls, we're going to talk about the button that's labeled AB here that lets you add a field, and we're also going to be talking about the button that lets you add a picture. So we'll come back to those later on, but you'll also notice that there are 3 buttons here that would allow you to add lines, rectangles, and a rounded rectangle. So I'm going to make the report look a little unusual here, but if I click on, for instance, the rounded rectangle, I could then, you'll notice I get a plus sign here. I can then click on the report where I want to start drawing my rounded rectangle and surround, something like the total for each homeroom. And then when I close out and say yes, you can see that now the total is basically circled. So again, using the report controls menu, you can add lines, rectangles, and rounded rectangles or circles. Now sometimes you come in and you edit the layout of a report and then realize there's something else you wanted to add to the report in the request editor area. So let me close out of here and go back to the request editor. Let's say that after making some of these changes, I decide that I want to include the ethnic code for the student in the report. Now that I've gone and I've adjusted the format, when I go into data items, again, I get the message that I have a customized layout. So I'll click continue and I'll choose the field that I want to add. I'll just double click on ethnic here and I'll click OK, and I get the message saying I have a customized layout. Do I want to go back to the automated layout, the original format, or keep my custom layout? It does tell you that if you keep the custom layout, you're going to have to manually update the layout with these changes that you made, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to choose to keep my custom layout, and when I preview my report, you're going to notice that ethnicity is not visible on it. Okay, I just have date of birth and gender. Because I've added a data item after I've gone in and changed the format, I need to physically add the ethnic field to the layout of this report. So I'll close out of the preview and go into Edit Layout. And the way that you add a new field to a report that you've already started to customize, number one, you need to add the data item to the list of data items in the report setup, as we already did. And then in the layout, you'd come to the Report Controls menu and click on the AB button. That's going to allow you to add a new field. You get the plus sign there, position that where you want this information to display, and when I click, because I've said I want to add a new field, when I click, a screen pops up for me and I simply type the field name in this expression box. The field name that I type in has to be the exact name as it's used in MMS. So that's ethnic. I'll click OK. You'll notice that it adds the ethnic field there. I can highlight this and move it around. If I want to extend the field so that there's more room for the information to be printed out, I simply click on the side of the field and just drag with my mouse and I'll extend that field out. I'm going to close out and say yes, I want to save my changes, and now the ethnic field is listed. Doing something like that, adding a new field to the report would probably also prompt you to come into the layout and add a column heading for that. So again, remember, you can click on the A button, and when you click in a location on the report, it allows you to type in the label you want. And then to add an underline, I could click on the line button and simply, again, holding down the button on my mouse, just drag the line I want to add there. Now you can also add logos to your reports. This is going to lead us to looking at that other button on the report controls. Let me move down the title bar a little bit, and when I move down the title, it moves everything else down as well. If you have a school logo you want to add to the report, you would click on that Picture OLE button here. Position, where you want that logo to go, and then when you click, because you've clicked on that Picture OLE button, it brings up a screen that lets you navigate to where that file is located, where that logo file is located. So I'm going to click on the ellipsis button here, go to my MMS directory, and pick a file. I'll click OK. It'll come in here pretty small, but I can drag that to make it bigger. I can also double click on the logo once it's in there and select the option to scale the picture. That will allow me to make it bigger. And then when I close out, my logo's there. Just as an aside, we're focusing on the formatting here of these Precision Report Writer reports. In MMS itself, you might have noticed that for all of our reports that you can generate from MMS, such as the report card or mail merge letters, there's an output option for you, and one of the options there is a user copy of the report. When you select user copy and then go in to modify the report, it brings you to a layout screen that follows this same sort of idea. You'll see these different menus, and depending on the report, you might have similar sections of the report to work with, but that user copy is where you could add text to a standard MMS report or logos and so forth. So a lot of the things we're looking at here, you could apply these same concepts to the user copy of a standard MMS report. And as I said, we've now looked at most of the items in the report controls menu. This layout menu, you'll have different options available to you based on what you've highlighted. So if I highlight my logo, I have the option to center it horizontally, center it vertically, bring to the front, send to the back. If I highlight a group of items, let me do my column headings here. I get additional options in the layout menu where I'd be able to align, parts of the items I've selected. So depending on whether if I've highlighted a column or a row, I could align top edges or bottom edges. And then also align them and center them. So you have some formatting options there based on whether you've selected a single item on the report or a group of items on the report. Now let me close out of here now that we've looked at a number of the different features in the edit layout area, and I'm going to go back to my basic homeroom listing, which again is simply the student name, birthday, and gender. And let me, actually I'm going to do a whole different report for the student pictures. I wanted to point out to you how you could include student pictures in the Precision Report Writer reports that you create. Please realize that this feature will only work if your tech person or MMS administrator has loaded student pictures into MMS. So if you can see the student pictures in MMS when you look at a student profile, then you'd be able to use this feature. So let me create a new report. It's going to be a detail report, and I'm simply going to call it pictures or student pictures. Okay, in the data items, I'm going to select the student names, and then I'm going to choose a field that's called ST Pict, P-I-C-T, as in student picture. So it's this field right here, the STPICT. I'm going to double click on that to move it over. I'm actually going to hide that as well. So with the student picture highlighted, I'm going to click on hide so that that information is available in the report, but it's not going to be printed out. So if I looked at a preview, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to go into the sort and group area and double click on last, first, middle so that the students are in alphabetical order for me. And then to actually make the pictures appear, I need to go into the layout. So I'm going to click on Edit Layout. And I'm going to click on the OLE button and click after the student name. Instead of navigating to a particular picture file, I'm simply going to type in the name of that picture field from MMS. So I'm just typing in the STPICT. Going to choose the option to scale the picture and retain the shape. And then this is very important. I need to come to the Print When button over here on the right. And at the bottom of this screen where it says print only when the expression is true, I'm going to type in the word file and then parentheses and then STPICT and then a close parentheses. I'll click OK and OK again. You'll see that we now have an image field there. I'm just going to move that up a little bit and extend that. Well, then my students will be pretty elongated, so I'm going to move down the detail area so I have a little bit more space to work with, and then just move down the student picture so it's a little more proportional. Okay, they're tiny, but you can see I've got the names and then the student pictures there for any students who do have pictures. And of course, I could go into the layout again and adjust the sizing of this field, you know, if I need the pictures to be bigger. Okay, so that allows you to bring student pictures onto those reports if that's something that would be useful for you. Okay, now that we've looked at some formatting tools that are available to you and features like pulling in a logo to the report or pulling in the student pictures, what we're going to look at next are expressions and variables. And these are tools you can actually set up in a report to force the report to do some calculations for you as it runs so that you're not limited to just getting a total of the number of students in a homeroom. You know, you can increase your flexibility in terms of getting the reports to do some calculations for you. So I'm going to start by creating a new report. And this report, just to give you a sense of what we're going for here, is initially going to give me just totals for the different attendance codes that I use. You know, how many absences have I had, how many tardies, how many dismissals, you know, how many occurrences do I have of these different attendance codes. So it's going to start off fairly simple, but then what I'm going to have the system do is break out those totals for me so that it shows me how many girls, how many boys, you know, had those different attendance codes. And then when we get to the variable piece of this, I'm going to have the system do percentages for me for males and females. So we're going to start very basic, and we're going to add components to this report so that you can see how expressions and variables can really increase the flexibility of what you can do. So I'm going to call this my, let's just do attendance totals here. So as I said, it's going to start out very simply. I'm not even going to do student names on this one because I'm mainly interested in just numbers. So for my data items, it's literally going to be one item, the attendance code. So I'm just going to double click on code, save code, and click OK. Now if I preview this, what you're going to be seeing are, you know, quite a few attendance codes. Basically the system is displaying for me every code that's been assigned to every student. It's just that I haven't connected that information on the report to the student names or anything. Again, since my goal is to get totals for these, back on the request editor, I'm going to go to sort and group. I'm going to move over the attendance code field and group on that. I'll show you what that looks like now. So now what it's done is simply grouped on each of the different attendance codes that students have. But again, I'm interested in totals here. So I'll go back to sort and group. And remember, in the sort and group, when you've grouped on something, you can go to the options and calculations and select a count of the records in each group. And we'll look and see what impact that has. Okay, so now in addition to having each attendance code separated out, the system's now giving me totals for how many times each attendance code has been assigned to students. Now I'm going to go into the layout, and I'm going to adjust the layout a little bit so that I have my information a bit more condensed before I venture into creating an expression. So I'm going to close out of the preview and go into the layout, and I'm just going to make some adjustments here. My title page is fine. I'll leave that as is. My page header, I'm going to remove the page numbers and all of those fields there. So I'll highlight them and just hit delete. This column heading of SAF is not going to really mean anything to people, so I'm going to delete that, and I'm also going to delete the underline because I'm going to create a new column heading here. I'm actually going to create two columns, one for the code itself and then one for the total of each code. So to add the text of those column headings, I'm going to click on the A and then come up here, and my first will be code. And then I'm going to click on the A again to come up with a heading for total. I'm going to highlight both of those, and I'm going to use the handy dandy align bottom edges because I never get anything completely aligned when I do it by hand. So now they're aligned. I'll click on the line option in my report controls so I can underline those. And then I'm going to move the page header up to right underneath my column headings. In the group header, I'm going to delete everything that's there. And I'm going to move the group header right up next to the page header. Detail area, I'm not interested in that. I'm going to move that right up next to the group header. And then in the group footer, I'm going to be removing some of this information also. I do want the field that shows me the attendance code because I obviously need to know absence, tardy, etc. I don't need to have these two labels for safe code, so I'll delete those. And I'm also going to delete this field because it's just a redundant instance of the attendance code itself. I'm going to take the count of the attendance codes and I'm going to move that up and then move that over, and I'm just using my arrow keys here so that it's underneath my column heading for total, and I'll move the field for the attendance code over so it's under my column heading for the code. And then I'm going to remove the label that says records and group. And then I'll move up the group footer so we're a little more condensed here. And then I'm going to just get rid of everything that was in the group and page footer. So having done that, let me close out of here and show you what that looks like. And see, just from adjusting the format, I've condensed this. So basically it's showing me, you know, here's the attendance code, here's how many instances you have of the attendance code. Now I'm going to add an expression. What I want to do next on this report is break out these totals so it'll show me how many are associated with males and how many are associated with females. So in an expression, I force the report to do some counting for me basically. So I'm going to close out of here and go into the layout. First, because I want the report to give me totals for male and female, I have to have the gender data item in my report so that I can force the system to do some counts for me. So I'm going to go back to the data items. I'm going to get the message that I've customized the layout, and that's fine. And I'll add sex to my data items. Okay, and I'll click OK. I'll keep my custom layout and preview. Now when I go into the edit layout, I've added the gender field to the report so that I can have the system do some counting for me. Okay, so to add an expression that's going to tell the system to do some counting for me, I'm going to click on the AB button to add a field and then click here right next to the total count. And I'm going to write an expression. Now I'm going to click on the ellipsis button here because it brings me to a screen where I have a little bit more room to type the expression, and it's also going to give me the ability to check and make sure like all my syntax is correct. So the expression I'm going to type in is an if statement, IIF, and then parentheses, and then I tell the system what field I want it to look at. So in this case it's gender. And I'm going to tell it, if the gender is male, I want you to count 1, and if the gender is not male, just count it as a 0. And then I'm going to have the system sum that up. So after the parentheses, I type in the word sex, that's the name of the data item, equals, and then in a single quote, I type in the value that I'm having it look for, which is male, then a close quote and a comma, and then a 1 to tell it that if the gender is male to count a 1, and then a comma and a 0 to tell it if the gender is not male, count a 0, and then a close parentheses. Let me put this in Word for you so you can see it a little bigger. We'll bump up the font here. Okay, and from a syntax standpoint, we're telling it if the gender is male, count a 1. If the gender is not male, count a 0. We're going to be creating another expression to have it count the females. So it'll follow the same exact format, but we'll tell it if the gender is F for female, then count a 1. If you create expressions like this, you need to know what the data item is in MMS, so you're telling the system exactly what data item to look for, and you need to know exactly what the values in that field might be. In this case, M or F for male or female, and capital M or F. If I do a lowercase m here within those single quotes, the system won't recognize that because that data is capitalized. So if you were going to do a similar expression for something like counting up students in a particular grade level, you'd need to know what the MMS data item is for grade level. You know, it would have to follow the format of the actual data item in MMS, and you'd need to know, to put in those single quotes, what values you have in the grade level field. You know, a 0, 9 as opposed to a 9, and so forth. Okay, so I've typed in my expression here, and I like typing my expression here on this screen that gives me a little bit more room because there's a verify button. The verify button checks the syntax and makes sure that I haven't missed a quote or a comma or something like that. So I'm going to click on verify, and if no message pops up, then I know the syntax is correct. So I'll click OK and OK. I'm just going to expand this a little bit, and you can see the beginnings of that expression that I typed in. I have one more thing I need to do. I'm going to double click on that field. Now that I've written the expression, I need to go into calculations and tell it what to do with that information. So I'm having it, you know, count a 1 for every male that it comes across, and then I want it to sum that up. Okay, sum up how many 1s you have is basically what I'm telling it. So now if I close out and preview, this number represents, of these total absences, how many were assigned to males, how many total tardies were assigned to males. Now when I go back into the layout of the report, I want to have the system count up for me how many females. And instead of reinventing the wheel, you know, clicking on the AB button and setting this all up from scratch, I'm going to take an easier way, and I'm going to highlight, I'm just going to click on the field that I created with the expression, and I'm going to copy it, and I have to use my keyboard shortcuts here, the Control-C to copy it, and then I'm going to do a Control-V to paste it. I've basically copied that field and pasted it right on top of itself. But if I use my right arrow to move it over, you're going to see that I have 2 of the same thing. This one is the expression to count up those males. This one is that expression to count up the males. Except here, I'm going to click on the ellipsis button, and I'm going to change the capital M to a capital F to force it this time to sum up how many females. I'm also going to purposely make a mistake here. I'm going to delete the close quote after the F because I want to show you that when you hit the verify button, if it finds that something is wrong, it will tell you. Now this just says it's got an unrecognized phrase or keyword, but basically if you get any sort of message here when you click OK, take a look at the expression you wrote. There's probably a comma or a quote missing. You might have spelled something incorrectly. So I'll add that close quote and verify again. Click OK. And now when I preview, I've got the counts for male and the counts for female. I'm going to go back in and add column headings for those. So I'll add some text. If I highlight all 4 column headings, I can align their bottom edges. I can click on the underline that I created before and just drag that out further. And I could highlight all of these items here and set their font to be the same, just so everything's consistent here. Okay. I'm going to move the expression that does the males over a little bit so it's more under the males column. Okay, and I'll align these guys as well. Okay. So we added an expression to force the system to do those sums, find out how many males, find out how many females for me. So as I kind of alluded to, you could use an expression to have the system count up, the students from a particular grade level or things like that if you want to break out totals by grade level as well. And this syntax here is used to do that. Now we're going to go a step further and we're going to add some variables. Variables, if you flash back to algebra class, kind of have the same use here in the report writer. Let me kind of work a little bit backwards. Now that I have these totals for how many males and females for the different attendance codes, I'm thinking, boy, it would be great to have percentages. What percentage of these absent codes were male, what percentage were female? Well, if you want the report to do something like that for you, to actually calculate percentages, think first of what's that calculation you want the report to do for you. Let me go back into my Word document here. And, when you think about a percentage calculation, the system takes a value, divides it by something else, and gives you a decimal, correct? It's going to give us a 2 decimal, or at least 2 decimal places. To turn that into a percentage, what do? I multiply that by 100. And that gives me my final percentage. So if I think about the calculation that I want the system to do, I then need to break down what I'm going to have it divide. So for me to get a percentage of males, I needed to take the total number of males, that were assigned an absent code, and divide by the total number of those absent codes. That's going to give me the decimal that I'll then multiply by 100 to get my percentage. So the variables I need to set up are the ones that are going to give me the total number of males. I'm also going to need one for the total number of females, and I need one for the total number of codes, okay, so that I can get a percentage for absent, tardy, dismissal, and so forth. I need these variables in place in the report if I'm going to be able to do my percentage calculation. So we're going to go back to the layout of the report and look at how you can create those variables. And the variables kind of build on those expressions that we added. Okay. So to add a variable, I'm going to come to the report menu here, and you'll notice that there's an option for variables. You always want to leave this first option in place, but you'll notice that there's a blank line underneath it, and you simply click there and type in a name to give this particular variable. So one of my variables is total males. I'm just going to separate it with an underscore there. Okay. I'm going to come down to the box asking me what value I'm going to store there. Here's where I'm going to repeat that expression that I did. I just clicked on the ellipsis button to get to the screen where I can type the expression. This is going to be my same expression. If gender is male, count to 1, otherwise count to 0. I'm going to click on verify to make sure my syntax is correct, and then click OK. As before, over here on the right, I'm going to tell it to sum up those ones that it finds. And here where it says reset, I want it to reset every time the attendance code changes. So basically what I'm telling it is, don't just give me a total number of males for the entire report. I want a total number of males for absences. I want a total number of males for tardies and so forth. So it's important to tell it to reset the total number of males each time the attendance code changes. Then I'm going to come and click on the next blank option and add total females. Come down to the value, click on the ellipsis, and type in the expression that's going to sum up the females. I'll click on verify, click OK, and again, tell it to sum and to kind of recalculate it for each attendance code. And then lastly, I need a variable for the total codes, total number of codes. This, for the value, is simply going to be the safe code. Okay, I'm just going to tell it, look at the attendance code and count up, how many instances you have of each attendance code. And that also is going to reset for each different attendance code. So here I've created the different pieces I need to be able to do my ultimate calculation. Sometimes what I'll do at this point, just to make sure my variables are correct, is I'll come into the report and I'll click on the AB button to add a field, and I'll tell it, show me what you have for total males. This is a way to kind of make sure that the variable I set up is correct. So if I see that those numbers mimic the original expression I had for the total number of males, then I know that variable is correct. Let me just delete that. And now let's add an expression that's going to do that calculation for the percentages for us. Now if I go back to my Word document, just so you can see what's going to happen here, when I do my percentage calculation in the report, I obviously need to put it in terms that the report will understand. So I'm going to be typing in the variable I created, total males, divided by total code. I'm going to check my exact wording there for the variables I created. I'm going to divide them, and then remember I need to multiply them by 100 to actually get a percentage. So I'm going to surround these with parentheses, following my good old order of operations there. So it does the division first, multiplies it by 100. Now there's the potential that I could get numerous decimal places after the decimal point. So I'm going to add information that's going to tell the system to round this off to 2 decimal places for me. So I'm going to enter a comma and then a 2. And then I'm going to surround this whole thing with parentheses. And in front of that, tell the report to round this off using, our standard rounding rules. Okay, so I'm translating, this numerical calculation into terms that the report will understand based on the variables I've created. So I'm just going to go back to the report and variables just to refresh my memory. Okay, I made these all plural. And I'm going to come back, click on the AB button, click in the report, and enter my expression here. This first one will be for a percentage of males. total males divided by total codes, parentheses, times 100, and show me 2 spaces for that. I'll verify that to make sure I didn't miss anything. Click OK. Now that field expanded to show me everything that's in there. I can certainly shrink that up a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the totals for male and female. I'm going to copy and then paste using my keyboard shortcuts, Control-C, Control-V. I'm going to move that copy over to the right a little bit, double-click on it, click on the ellipsis button, and the only change I'm going to make here is that we're dividing total females by total codes. And I'll shrink that up a bit. We'll highlight all of these guys. We'll align them. Let's do top edges this time just for the heck of it. These aren't all the same size, so I'll drag this down a little bit. And I'm just going to add column headings here for % male and % female. And when I run this, okay, then I'll see my percentages, again, out to 2 decimal places because I put that comma 2 at the end of my calculation, and I preceded the calculation with that rounding command so it rounds off correctly for those decimal places. And I could then, of course, go in and adjust my formatting so things are aligned, and I've got an underline under the % male and % female. But hopefully you have a sense of how you can use the expressions, to do counts and sums for you here, and how you can create variables if there are calculations you want to do within the report itself. Now that we've delved into expressions and variables, which can, be kind of complex, I want to show you another feature that's a little bit more straightforward, and it's the feature in the layout where you can tell the system to print only when certain conditions are true. So I'll start a new request, and this will just be our print when examples. I'm going to go into data items and simply select the student names, and I'll sort on them. So we have a straightforward list here. Let me show you a simple example of the print when feature. I'm going to go into the layout and double click on the name field, and I'm going to come to print when. Down here at the bottom, oh, I'm sorry, hang on one second. Before I do that, basically what I'm going to be doing on this report is having just females print in bold. So the boys will print normally, the girls will be bolded. So I'm going to actually copy this name field. So I'll highlight it and do a Control-C to copy and a Control-V to paste. And And I'm actually going to leave them right on top of each other and double click. This opens up one of the instances of the name field. And I'm going to go to print when, and now what I'm going to do is simply enter the field sex equals, and then in single quotes here, female. So I'm basically telling it, print only when the gender is female. And then what I'm going to do with that still highlighted, I'm going to go up to the format and font and choose bold. And I'm just going to move this over a little bit for you so that you'll see there's one instance of the name field that's bolded and there's one that's regular. They're just coexisting, one on top of the other. I'm going to close out of here and say yes. Message that I forgot to add the gender field to the report itself. So I'll go back to data items. I'm going to continue. I have a customized layout, so I'll add gender. Click OK. Keep the custom layout. Because I added the gender item after I had customized the format, gender won't show up on the report unless I physically add that field to the report. So if I preview now, what I've done by adding gender to the data items is now the system understands what I indicated in the print when area. If the gender, which I've now included in the data items, is female, bold that student name. Okay, so you can see that my boys are in regular font and it's the girls who are bolded. So as you can imagine, you could use this same process with things like year of grad or grade level. If you include that data item in the report, you can then do a print when based on that data item. So let's do that. Let's go to the data items and I'll add grade level from the EMF table. I'll keep my custom layout, I'll preview that, and I'm going to go into the layout and again just double click on one of these instances, and in the print when I'll change it from looking at the gender to the grade level field equals 10, and then click OK and OK again. And now I have different students highlighted, but these are the ones whose grade level is 10. Okay. Other uses might be you could take the field that you use to indicate special ed, and as long as you know, again, the data item name in MMS, you have to make sure it's entered exactly here, and the value in that field that you're looking for. You can use that print when feature. So those are some of the more advanced features that are available to you in the report writer. I'd point out again that in our help documentation, we have sections on things like the output and the page layout and customizing those layouts. So you can refer to the documentation here for more information about, the different toolbars and things you're going to see in the layout area, how you move items, how you resize them, how to add items to the report. Okay, so if we go into, for instance, adding objects, it's going to talk about how you add text, how you add a line, how to add a rectangle, and the school logo that we talked about. We'll go through those steps. So the documentation is really good at walking you through these different features. And as we've said since the first webinar, when you're creating an export, in Precision Report Writer. Our support department can help you with that because an export doesn't get into any of this more complicated formatting or variables and expressions and so forth. So if you're setting up an export and you have questions, you can certainly give us a call on support and we can assist you. With the reports themselves, because they can become very complex and our time resources are limited in the support department. If you have a specific question, you can certainly give us a call, but you want to make sure that your question's focused on, boy, the filter I set up isn't giving me the right students. We can help you by taking a look at the filter and determining what's going on there. Or, I added ethnicity to my report, but it's not showing up. We can help you identify that that's because you've change the layout of the report and you need to go into the layout and physically add that field to the report. So if you have a specific question like that, we can help you out. Just keep in mind that we're not able to walk you through from start to finish creating some of these more complex reports. But hopefully you've gotten a sense of the flexibility of the report writing tool and the various things it can do for you to help you report out that information that you need.